The Galactic Coalition's capital was a sprawling metropolis of glass towers, neural communication hubs, and crowded public squares that hummed with the quiet urgency of 1,000 cultures intertwined. On the grandest terrace of the central citadel, Councillor Melora Tyre stood, gazing out over the city. Her mind, however, was elsewhere, on the report she had just received. The Galactic Intelligence Bureau had dismissed it as a glitch, a mere anomaly in the vast expanse of space. But she knew better. Her instincts told her this was something more. The message had come in a pulse, a signature too perfect to be random. An old human code embedded within the transmission, a relic of a forgotten era. It was a signal humanity's lost empire had once broadcasted across the stars before its fall. The tone, the frequency, everything was human in origin. But that had been centuries ago. How could this be possible? The humans were long gone, or so the Coalition believed. Her fingers brushed the cold surface of the glass as she turned to the officer behind her. "Lieutenant Morn, prepare a fleet. I want a full investigation into this anomaly. No one else can know about this." Morn's brows furrowed. A fleet, Counselor, for a faint signal from an old system. I don't care what the Intelligence Bureau says," she snapped, her voice carrying a weight of authority. "Get it done. No one in the Coalition has the right to ignore this." Morn hesitated, but nodded, knowing better than to argue further. The signal had been traced to the edges of human territory, an ancient system left behind after humanity's fall. A forgotten place, veiled in mystery and myth, the kind of place that only legends and old war stories spoke of. The Galactic Council had long ceased to care about humanity. They were no longer a threat. In fact, most systems had assumed the human empire had simply collapsed under its own weight, internal strife, political betrayal, and an apocalyptic war that left nothing but ashes. But something about the signal felt wrong. It was too deliberate, too purposeful. Could this really be the rise of humanity from the ashes? In the bowels of the Galactic Coalition's flagship, the Ascended Horizon, Varner sat hunched over a console, monitoring the same signal. A seasoned officer in the Coalition fleet, he had heard whispers of this day. Rumors passed down through generations of his family, warriors who had fought in the final bloody days of humanity's empire. They called it the Prometheus. The Supercarrier, humanity's last hope, had vanished without a trace after the collapse of their empire. Stories of its power had been whispered in fear, its destruction unparalleled. As a child, Varner had heard tales of it in his home. His ancestor, a veteran of humanity's final war, spoke of the ship in hushed tones, as though the very name could bring down the stars themselves. Could it be true? Could the Prometheus still be alive? His fingers hovered over the controls, his breath shallow. The Coalition had no idea what they were about to face. Varner made the decision to act. He sent a brief message to his superiors, requesting permission to investigate the source of the signal personally. With the usual bureaucratic delay, he knew it would take days for an official response. But his gut told him there wasn't time to waste. He began preparations for a small scouting mission. Nothing too bold, but enough to get closer to the signal. As he entered the cold, metallic corridors of the Ascended Horizon, his mind raced. What could the signal mean? Why now, after so many years? And why had humanity left behind something so dangerous, so powerful, without any trace? In the distance, an alarm sounded. A blip in the data. His pulse quickened. The signal had intensified. The moment the signal intensified, Varner's instincts kicked in. The cold, metal walls of the Ascended Horizon felt suffocating as he rushed toward the command deck. He didn't have time for formalities. His entire career had been spent in the galactic fringes, tracking the mundane, the routine, and the predictable. But this was different. There was something undeniable in the signal's new urgency, a sharpness that demanded attention. As he entered the command center, the buzz of activity stopped. The crew turned toward him, faces lit by the soft glow of holographic displays. A younger officer, Lieutenant Arendel, was already at the primary console, scanning the readings. "Captain Varner," she said, her voice barely containing the tremor of disbelief. "The signal's frequency has changed. It's adjusting itself, almost like it's trying to communicate. It's originating from the uncharted system. It's—" She hesitated, glancing up at Varner's hard expression. "It's human, sir. It's definitely human." Varner swallowed the bitter taste in his throat. "It's impossible. It's coming from beyond the asteroid field," Arindel added, "and it's growing stronger. We— Prepare the fleet. We're going to investigate," Varner commanded, cutting her off. He didn't need to hear more. The implications were clear. Humanity had been lost, scattered to the winds. But if this was their supercarrier, the Prometheus, there was no time to waste. As Varner strode through the corridors of the command ship, he couldn't shake the image of his ancestor's face. His great-grandfather, a war hero who had fought during the last days of humanity's empire, had often spoken of the Prometheus. It was more than just a ship. It was a symbol of humanity's unmatched technological might. A weapon of mass destruction capable of leveling entire fleets or worse. The Prometheus was a ghost, a myth. But now, it seemed, it was real. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of the galaxy, within the heart of the human enclave known as the New Dawn, Captain Lyra Quinn was standing before the flickering holographic display of the Prometheus's control room. The massive ship, buried for centuries in an asteroid belt, was now alive. For Quinn, this moment was the culmination of years of preparation, of rebuilding humanity's strength in secret. She had never known the Prometheus in its prime, but she had studied its archives, its design schematics, and she had learned what it could do. She knew the ship's power wasn't just physical, it was strategic. The Prometheus wasn't simply a weapon. It was the symbol of a forgotten empire, the last testament to humanity's glory and might. Her crew, a mix of the best survivors from scattered human colonies, looked to her for guidance. As the Prometheus's systems hummed to life, the energy from its core reactors surged, filling the void around them with a haunting hum. The ship was waking, its ancient engines vibrating with power. It felt like an old, slumbering titan stretching its limbs. "Captain Quinn," a voice from the bridge called. "We're receiving an encrypted message from the fleet. It's Coalition." Quinn frowned, her eyes narrowing. The Coalition. They hadn't even considered the possibility that humanity might still be alive. The only thing they knew was the stories, the fear, and the myth. The fact that the message had reached them so quickly only confirmed one thing. The Coalition had noticed the Prometheus's return. She made a decision. Send a reply. Broadcast it to the Coalition's fleet. Let them know that humanity is back, and we are no longer willing to be ignored. As the transmission systems activated, a cold smile crept onto Quinn's face. The galaxy might have forgotten humanity, but the Prometheus was about to change all of that. They had been hiding for too long, but the time had come to reclaim their place in the stars. The ascendant horizon and its small fleet of Coalition ships jumped into the star system, where the human signal originated. It was an eerie place, desolate, with swirling asteroid fields and remnants of ancient, uncharted worlds. The system had been forgotten by the galaxy for centuries, a place no one bothered to visit after humanity's collapse. Yet now, the very air seemed charged with anticipation. Varner stood at the front of the command deck, his eyes fixed on the holographic display as the fleet moved deeper into the asteroid belt. He could feel it in his bones. This was no mere search mission. Whatever they were about to find, it was going to change everything. "Captain," Lieutenant Arindel's voice cut through his thoughts. "We're picking up something. Faint, but it's definitely there. I'm getting a heat signature, coming from the inner quadrant of the asteroid field. It's massive. Could it be?" "It's the Prometheus," Varner interrupted, his voice quiet but steady. There was no mistaking it. He'd seen the reports. He'd heard the old stories. The sheer scale of the heat signature alone confirmed it. The ship was here, waiting, hidden for centuries. The crew moved swiftly, preparing for what could only be described as a confrontation. Varner's mind raced. This wasn't just about locating a lost relic of human technology. This was about preventing the resurgence of something the Coalition had long feared. Humanity's power had once been so overwhelming that entire star systems had fallen beneath its might. Could this ship be as powerful as the legends claimed? "Prepare to deploy scout drones," Varner ordered, his voice low but firm. "And keep your distance. We don't know what we're walking into." As the drones were released, they cut through the dense asteroid belt, sending back faint signals of their own, struggling to break through the interference. The silence stretched on, heavy and tense, until finally, a massive shadow began to take shape. The Prometheus emerged from the chaos of asteroids, slowly and with purpose. The sight was breathtaking. An enormous, imposing supercarrier that dwarfed any vessel the Coalition had ever seen. It glided forward with an eerie stillness, its hull covered in a layer of dust and cosmic debris. Yet, even in this state of dormancy, it radiated power. The colossal ship's engines pulsed with barely contained energy, as though it had been lying in wait for centuries. A hum of activity filled the command deck as the Ascendant Horizons crew observed, their expressions a mixture of awe and dread. The Prometheus was a weapon. There was no question about that. But it was also a symbol, one of a lost empire, one of humanity's last gifts to the galaxy. "Captain," Arindel whispered, her voice laced with disbelief. "It's alive. I'm reading systems activation." Varner's jaw tightened. He had known this moment would come. He had never imagined it would be so overwhelming. "Open a communication channel," Varner ordered, his voice steady, though his heart was racing. He wasn't sure what kind of response they would get, whether the Prometheus would acknowledge them at all, or whether it would consider them a threat. After a brief pause, the screen flickered. A transmission was coming in. But it wasn't what Varner expected. A sharp, calculated voice came through, cutting through the static. "This is Captain Lyra Quinn of the Prometheus. You've found us." Varner froze. The voice was human, definitively human. And the tone was calm, almost casual, as if Quinn had been waiting for this moment, prepared for it. "I suggest you turn back now, before things get complicated. The Prometheus is not here for a fight. But if you insist on one, we will give you one." Quinn's words were cold, but they held a certain finality. She wasn't offering negotiations. She was offering a warning. Varner's mind raced. He had expected hostility, but it was as though the ship itself had come alive again, with humanity's confidence restored. "Captain," Arindel called out from her station, "there's something else. The ship is deploying drones. They're forming a defensive perimeter." Varner stared at the screen, his breath shallow. This was no longer just an investigation. The Prometheus had returned, and it was prepared to defend itself with everything it had. "We're not prepared for this," Arindel whispered. Varner's eyes narrowed. "We never were." The Prometheus hung in space like a shadow, its sheer size dominating the view. Around it, the drones it had deployed formed a formidable wall, the cold, mechanical eyes of the machines scanning the Coalition ships with a chilling precision. Varner's fleet was pinned, outgunned, and outclassed at every turn. No one had prepared them for this. The Prometheus wasn't just a relic. It was alive, and it had no intention of being ignored any longer. Varner stood in front of the massive display, eyes scanning the readouts as his mind raced. The message was clear. Humanity had returned. But it wasn't just the Prometheus itself that sent a ripple through the galaxy. It was the words that followed, the voice of Captain Lyra Quinn that broadcasted across every Coalition frequency. "I am Captain Lyra Quinn of the Prometheus," she said, her voice calm but resolute. "You are far from home, Captain Varner. You and your fleet have discovered the last of humanity's greatest legacy. And now, I'm giving you a choice." The message played on repeat, each word carved into the air, echoing through the cold void of space. Varner's hands gripped the sides of the command station as the transmission continued. The Coalition's empire has long forgotten us, as though humanity was a mere footnote in galactic history, Quinn continued. But we are not forgotten. The Prometheus is here, and it is no longer a ghost. It is a beacon of what once was. I will not ask for your approval or your permission. Humanity will no longer be relegated to the shadows. You will either recognize our return and our place among the stars, or we will carve it out for ourselves. Varner's heart raced as the weight of Quinn's words settled in. This wasn't a declaration of war. It was something worse. Humanity, who had been written off, dismissed, and discarded, was back with a vengeance. They had returned not only to reclaim what they once lost, but to assert their rightful place among the stars, and no amount of resistance could stop them. This message, Quinn continued, is not just for you, Captain Varner. It is for every species, every government, and every coalition in this galaxy. The Prometheus is the harbinger of our return. Choose your next actions wisely, for they will determine if we are allies or enemies. The transmission ended, leaving an oppressive silence that seemed to stretch forever. Varner felt the weight of Quinn's words like a physical presence in the room. The sheer audacity of her message left him reeling. How had they rebuilt such power in secret? The Prometheus wasn't just a weapon. It was the key to humanity's revival, and they were offering the galaxy no choice but to accept it. Captain, we're picking up multiple signals from the Coalition's inner council, Lieutenant Arundel said, her voice tight with apprehension. They're demanding a response to the transmission. They're calling for an emergency council meeting. Varner turned, his mind still reeling from Quinn's message. The political ramifications of this were enormous. Humanity wasn't just back. They were positioning themselves as a force to be reckoned with. If the Coalition didn't act quickly, they could lose all leverage. Yet despite the overwhelming power of the Prometheus, Varner could sense something deeper in Quinn's tone. An invitation, not just a threat. She wasn't merely asserting power. She was trying to negotiate. For a moment, Varner thought about his own ancestors, their whispered stories about the end of humanity's empire. They had fallen, yes, but they had also left behind a legacy of unparalleled technological advancements. And now, those advancements were standing before him, ready to redefine the galaxy. He was interrupted by a sharp beep from his console. A new message flashed across the screen, a direct communication from the Coalition's council. The voice on the other end was cold, but Varner could hear the urgency beneath it. Captain Varner, the council has called for an immediate response. They will convene in 1 hour to discuss the implications of the Prometheus's reappearance. Your fleet must return to Coalition space at once. This is no longer a mere search mission. We need a strategy. The message ended abruptly, and Varner was left in stunned silence. The entire galaxy was about to be thrown into turmoil, and the path ahead was uncertain. Humanity had returned, and they were not going to be ignored. As the fleet began its retreat, Varner's thoughts raced. What would the council decide? Could they truly resist the return of humanity? Was there any way to prevent a conflict that was fast becoming inevitable? One thing was certain. The galaxy would never be the same again. The cold, sterile halls of the Galactic Coalition's council chamber were filled with a hushed tension as Varner stepped through the reinforced doors. The chamber, a colossal structure of polished chrome and crystal, was designed to exude an aura of authority and order. But today, the usual air of calm had been replaced by a palpable sense of unease. The future of the galaxy seemed to hang in the balance, and no one knew which way the scales would tip. The councilors, representing every faction and species in the galaxy, sat in their usual places, silent, brooding, waiting. Varner's boots echoed on the metal floor as he made his way to his designated spot before the council's central podium. He didn't flinch under their gazes, but he could feel the weight of their scrutiny. Captain Varner, Councilor Canera of the Zerith system, a towering insectoid figure with golden kitten, began, her voice dripping with formal authority. We are here to discuss the reappearance of the human vessel, the Prometheus. The message we received has shaken the very foundation of our understanding of the galaxy's current order. Varner stood at attention, his hands clasped behind his back. Counselor Kanara, I have provided all the data we have on the situation. The Prometheus has reawakened, and its captain, Lyra Quinn, has made a clear declaration. Humanity is no longer a dead civilization. They are back, and they are asserting their place among the stars. Place. Counselor Dreelan, the cynical Skoran representative, scoffed from the other side of the chamber. He was a sharp, wiry creature with black, sleek skin and an ever-present sneer. What makes them think they can simply return after centuries of isolation and claim a seat at the table? This is a disaster in the making, Varner. They're nothing but a ghost, a shadow, and it would be wise to remind them of that before they get any ideas. I agree, added Counselor Frelis, a stoic Yvrahi delegate from the industrial quadrant. The Prometheus is a relic, one we can barely comprehend. Humanity lost their place in the galaxy long ago. What they have in firepower is nothing compared to the political alliances and resources we have today. Varner clenched his fists. He knew the sentiment. The Coalition had always viewed humanity's fall as inevitable. The idea that they could come back and challenge the Galactic Order was a bitter pill to swallow. But the facts were undeniable. The Prometheus was no ghost. It was alive, and it was powerful. Then why have they not simply attacked? Varner's voice rang out, cutting through the rising murmurs. Why, after all this time, are they reaching out? Captain Quinn did not threaten us directly. She offered us a choice. She wants to negotiate. The room fell silent. Varner's statement hung in the air. His words were like a spark in dry grass. Small, but enough to shift the dynamics. This is not just a matter of firepower or politics, Varner continued, his voice steady, but filled with an underlying urgency. This is about history. Humanity has been gone for far too long, but they've never forgotten who they were. The Prometheus was not just any warship. It was humanity's greatest legacy. If we act rashly, we risk provoking a war we're not prepared for. Are you suggesting we negotiate with them? Counselor Kanara's voice was skeptical, her antennae twitching. What would we offer them? They've been lost for centuries. Our dealings with them have been non-existent. There's nothing to negotiate. Varner met her gaze, his eyes darkening with a quiet intensity. We don't have a choice anymore. The Prometheus is not just a symbol of humanity's military might. It is a symbol of something much more powerful, their unyielding will to survive. If we don't engage with them diplomatically, we risk losing not only the Prometheus, but also the possibility of peace with an entire reborn civilization. The room was still. For a long moment, no one spoke. The weight of Varner's words settled over them, and the counselors exchanged uneasy glances. Their pride, their fear, and their hunger for power warred within them. Finally, it was Counselor Frelis who spoke, his voice low and hesitant. What are you proposing, Varner? A diplomatic mission. What do we say to a race we've all but erased from our history? We tell them the truth, Varner replied, his voice unwavering. That we're willing to listen. That we understand they've suffered, that they've had to rebuild everything from nothing. And that we are prepared to find common ground before this leads to an all-out war. A murmur spread through the council. It was not a decision they were ready to make, but it was one they knew they had to face. The Prometheus had already shown its power. It would not be ignored, and it would not be denied. The council's decision was reached with a reluctant consensus. They would not go to war. Not yet, at least. Instead, Varner was tasked with leading a delegation to the Prometheus, to meet with Captain Lyra Quinn and open negotiations. The message was clear. Humanity would be given a chance to re-enter the galactic fold. The Coalition could no longer afford to ignore the possibility of a future with humans as a force, one way or another. Varner stood at the helm of the ascendant horizon once more, the weight of the galaxy's expectations pressing down on his shoulders. The ships in his fleet, small, fast, and heavily armed, were now preparing for a journey that felt more like a gamble than a diplomatic mission. He had read the data, seen the recordings of the Prometheus, and heard Quinn's chillingly confident words. The supercarrier was not merely a relic, it was a living, breathing symbol of humanity's return. But for all of Varner's preparation, nothing could prepare him for what lay ahead. "Captain." Arundel's voice broke through his thoughts, pulling him from his reverie. She stood at his side, her face tight with concern. "We've analyzed the latest readings from the Prometheus. Their fleet is assembling around the ship. There are at least a dozen ships, all heavily armed, and most of them are of human design. Some have been modified, but others, they're ancient. And I mean ancient, Captain." Varner's brow furrowed. The Prometheus's fleet was a mix of modern and archaic vessels, indicating that humanity had not only survived in isolation, but had somehow managed to adapt. These ships weren't just built for war. They were also a reminder of what had been lost. "How many do you think are combat-ready?" Varner asked, his tone clipped as he scanned the display. "At least 8 are operational," Arundel replied. "The others seem to be in various stages of restoration, but given the power we've seen coming from the Prometheus, I wouldn't underestimate them." Varner nodded, turning to face the crew at their stations. "All right, we move forward. Steady, but ready. We don't know what we're walking into, but the galaxy's future depends on how we handle this. Remember, this is a negotiation, not a battle." The words hung in the air, but deep inside, Varner wasn't sure he believed them. As the ascendant horizon and its fleet closed in on the Prometheus, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Every scan, every sensor sweep, brought back new data about the massive ship, how it was alive, how it pulsed with power that seemed to defy the laws of the galaxy. Humanity had never been just another species to be outgunned or outmanned. They had always found a way to rise above. And now, centuries after their supposed fall, they were back, and with them, the promise of a new power that could shift the balance forever. Varner's communicator buzzed to life. "Captain Varner, we're receiving a direct transmission from the Prometheus," Arundel said. Her voice was tight, cautious. "It's Captain Quinn. She's requesting your presence on the bridge immediately." Varner's heart raced. This was it, the first true face-to-face encounter with humanity's greatest legacy. His mind swirled with possibilities, each more dangerous than the last. "Patch it through," Varner said, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. A flicker of static filled the room, followed by the crisp, sharp image of Captain Lyra Quinn. She was standing in the command center of the Prometheus, her expression calm but determined. She didn't look like someone who had just woken a sleeping titan. No, Quinn was composed, like she had been in control all along. "Captain Varner." Quinn's voice rang out, each word laced with purpose. "I was beginning to think you'd let the opportunity pass you by." Varner took a breath, straightening. "We've come to listen, Captain Quinn. But I need to know one thing. Why now? Why reemerge after all these centuries of silence? What is it you want from the Coalition?" Quinn's lips twitched into a slight smile, but her eyes never wavered from the screen. "What I want," she said slowly, "is simple. Recognition. Humanity is no longer a forgotten race. The Prometheus is not just a weapon, Captain Varner. It's a statement. We are back, and we intend to take our place among the stars once more." Varner could hear the confidence in her words. She wasn't asking for permission. She was asserting a fact. And it was clear that despite the Coalition's power, humanity had the will to fight for it. "Then you're ready for war?" Varner asked, his voice steady but edged with disbelief. "I'm ready for whatever is necessary," Quinn replied, her tone unwavering. "But make no mistake, Captain. This is not a threat. It's a promise." The transmission ended, and Varner stood frozen, the weight of Quinn's words pressing down on him like 100 tons of stone. "Prepare for docking," Varner ordered, turning sharply. "We're going to meet this promise face to face." The ascendant horizon glided toward the Prometheus, the unknown ahead threatening to upend everything they thought they knew about the galaxy's future. The ascendant horizon drifted slowly into the shadow of the Prometheus, the massive supercarrier looming before them like a monolith of forgotten power. The fleet of human ships, now fully assembled, hung in the void like a protective barrier, a line in the sand daring the coalition to cross. Varner could feel the weight of every pair of eyes upon him. His crews, his fleets, and even the ghosts of history itself. "Captain, we're being hailed," Lieutenant Arundel said, her voice tight with the pressure of the moment. "It's a secure transmission, direct from the Prometheus's command deck." Varner nodded. He had known this would come, but that didn't make it any easier. His hand hovered over the comms control, the cold metal a reminder of just how far they had come. One wrong move, one misstep, and it could all spiral into chaos. "Put it through," Varner commanded. The screen flickered, and then Lyra Quinn appeared again. She stood at the heart of the Prometheus, surrounded by the glinting consoles and dim blue lighting that gave the ship a ghostly, otherworldly presence. She wasn't just the captain. She was the face of a civilization reborn. "Captain Varner." Quinn greeted him with a small, almost imperceptible smile, but there was nothing warm about it. Her gaze was sharp, calculating. "I trust your fleet has made all necessary preparations." "I'm here to listen, Captain Quinn," Varner replied, keeping his voice calm despite the gnawing tension in his chest. "I've brought a delegation. We're prepared to discuss terms." Quinn's smile faltered just slightly, replaced by a thin line. "Terms. Interesting choice of words. You think you have the upper hand here, Captain." Varner didn't flinch. "I'm here to find common ground. That's all." Quinn's expression remained unchanged, but there was an unspoken understanding between them. This was not going to be a peaceful sit-down negotiation. She wasn't looking for an alliance in the traditional sense. She was looking for acknowledgement, power, and for humanity's rightful place in the galaxy. "You'll find none of that in my negotiations, Captain Varner," Quinn said, her voice smooth like silk, but with an edge to it that sent a chill down Varner's spine. "What I offer you, and your coalition, is a choice. We are back, and we will take what is ours. If you choose to stand in our way, we will make sure that the galaxy knows what humanity can do when it's provoked. If you choose to recognize us, however, we can work together. But remember, your precious coalition has had time to grow comfortable. Humanity has had time to rebuild. And now, we are stronger than you realize." Her words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of centuries of history, power, and ambition. Varner could feel the ripple of anticipation pass through his crew. He knew what Quinn was offering wasn't a partnership. It was a declaration of inevitability. Humanity had returned, and the galaxy could either accept them or suffer the consequences. "I'm not here to threaten you, Captain Quinn," Varner said, his voice resolute, though he could sense the storm brewing just beneath the surface. "We're here to explore every possible avenue for peaceful coexistence. The coalition doesn't seek war. But we can't stand idly by while you make demands on us without knowing the full consequences." Quinn leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing with a quiet intensity. "You mistake my words, Captain. I'm not making demands. I'm stating a fact. Humanity will no longer be a forgotten relic. We will not live in the shadows of the galaxy's so-called progress. We are the true inheritors of this universe, and soon, everyone will see that." Her words weren't a promise. They were a challenge. Suddenly, the bridge lights flickered, and a new transmission window popped up on Varner's screen. It was a live feed from the fleet, an urgent transmission. Arundel's voice cut through the tension. "Captain, we've detected a large force approaching, just outside the system. Their trajectory suggests they're headed for the Prometheus." Varner's heart skipped a beat. "Who? Are they coalition ships?" he asked, his voice tight. "No, sir. These are human ships. They're using stealth technology to avoid detection, but they're definitely on their way. We believe they may be an independent faction, I'm not sure how they fit into this. Quinn's eyes flickered with interest as she looked at the new transmission. Ah, there it is, she murmured softly, her tone laced with dark amusement. The inevitable splinter group. There's always someone who can't stay out of the way. Varner's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? The galaxy never changes, Captain. Not really. Quinn's gaze locked onto Varner's, her voice becoming colder. There's always someone who believes they know better than the rest. Prepare yourself, Captain. You'll have more to deal with than just me. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving Varner with a growing sense of unease. A new player had entered the stage, and they might have even more power than he anticipated. Varner stood in stunned silence, the weight of Quinn's words sinking into him. A new faction. What did it mean for the future of the galaxy? There was no time to process the ramifications fully. The storm was already gathering, and every moment counted. The Coalition's fragile grip on the situation had just been tested in a way no one could have predicted. Captain, we need to act fast, Erindel said, her voice strained with urgency. If we don't respond quickly, we might find ourselves caught between the Prometheus and whoever these new ships are. They've already breached our sensor perimeter. They're not playing by the rules. Varner clenched his jaw, a ripple of frustration crossing his features. He had expected a delicate negotiation, but Quinn had just revealed another layer of complexity. Whoever these new players were, they weren't a part of the Coalition or the Prometheus. They were an unknown variable, and that made them dangerous. Captain, we're detecting more activity from the Prometheus as well, Lieutenant Durand reported from the communications console. They've started shifting positions, as if preparing for something. It could be a defensive move, or... Varner raised his hand to silence him. Prepare for the worst, but stay diplomatic. We need information before making any decisions. Get me a full readout on those incoming ships. The tension in the air was nearly palpable as Varner paced the bridge. The seconds felt like hours. The Prometheus wasn't just a ship. It was a symbol, a weapon, and now it had become the center of a galactic conflict that no one had seen coming. Humanity's return had set off a chain reaction, and Varner wasn't sure if the galaxy was ready to face the consequences. But then, another transmission cut through the tension, this time from the Prometheus. Captain Varner. Quinn's voice came through, her tone essy yet strangely calm. It seems you've got a bit of a complication on your hands. The ships I spoke of, they're headed straight for your fleet. Varner felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. What is this? Are you allied with them? Quinn's laughter was soft but deadly, a cold and mirthless sound. Oh no, Captain. These are not my people, but they are human, and they've come to remind you of something very important. Humanity doesn't have to play by your rules. We never did. Before Varner could respond, the feed went dead, leaving him with nothing but the growing sense of dread creeping up his spine. The new faction had made their move, and now it was up to him to decide how to handle it. On the ascended horizon, the crew scrambled to prepare for the incoming threat. Varner's mind raced. He had no idea what kind of fleet these new humans were commanding, but the fact that they had evaded Coalition sensors and now appeared to be heading straight for them suggested they were anything but conventional. Were they rogue survivors from humanity's collapse? Or something worse? They're about to break into weapons range, Erindel reported. Her fingers danced across the controls, pulling up tactical data. We can't afford to engage them on our own terms. We'll be outmatched, and we risk pushing the Prometheus to take action before we're ready. Varner stood still, torn between conflicting decisions. The Prometheus was right there. It loomed in the distance like an imposing reminder that humanity was no longer a fading memory. They were back, and they were not interested in negotiating from a position of weakness. We need to buy time, Varner said, his mind working through every option. Prepare a defensive posture. If we're going to avoid a full-scale war, we need to keep the Coalition from being forced into a decision. Let the Prometheus know we're not here to challenge them directly. As his orders went out to the fleet, Varner glanced one last time at the massive silhouette of the Prometheus in the distance. Lyra Quinn had shown him humanity's might, and now the unknown faction would test just how much power could be mustered in the wake of their return. There were no allies in the dark void of space, only enemies. And right now, Varner didn't know who to trust. A low rumble echoed through the ship, followed by a chilling announcement from the sensor crew. "Captain, the unknown ships have powered up their weapons. They're about to fire." The final confrontation was at hand. The Coalition's fleet, caught between the supercarrier, the Prometheus, and the unknown human faction, had no choice but to brace for impact. Everything Varner had worked for, every diplomatic effort, every plea for peace, was on the edge of collapse. The storm that had begun with Quinn's bold reappearance was now a full-blown galactic tempest, and it was only a matter of time before the first shots were fired.